around, including this one I'm wearing now, and of course, the absolutely magnificent black Spurs away shirt. And as if that wasn't enough, if you go onto their website and like the look of one of the shirts there, choose your size, pick the Champions League badge for the sleeve as well if you're that way inclined, then go to checkout and type the code BARN into the coupon section. That's BARN as in short for Barnaby. And when you do, you'll get a whopping 8% off your purchase. Now, I'm no mathematician, but 8% means if you've spent, say, and let's face it, I'm being optimistic here, 100 quid, then you get £8 off, not to be sniffed at. Get yourself to okjersey.com to pick one up, or if you're too lazy to type in the website, just scan the QR code that's on the left of me throughout this video. Enjoy. Hi guys, welcome to YouTube, welcome back to the channel. Tottenham have just been beaten 4-1 at the Emirates Stadium, and Eberechi Eze, remember him? Player that Spurs absolutely embarrassed themselves by not being able to get through the door. Has scored 3 goals, should probably have scored 4. Arsenal should probably have scored 8. And Tottenham have been absolutely embarrassed, which is what I've written in the title of this video. And in 2 games in the last month against our biggest rivals, Thomas Frank has set up the team to embarrass our fans. It's really, really genuinely appalling. CJ8793 says Frank needs to be sacked. Zinkworld, we're shit. Ladyweb, fuck. PKD says Michael Oliver crossed the line from incompetent to malevolent. This match needs to be audited and documented. No, we are responsible for getting battered. It's not Michael Oliver. He didn't have a great game, Michael Oliver. I'm not going to say he had a great game, but it certainly wasn't down to that. Shauno says, thank God that's over. Vidsumi says, bring back Pochettino. Well, do you know what? Let's talk about that, because Maurizio Pochettino is going to be available next summer after the World Cup. And frankly, ever since Pochettino left and we sacked him, this has been what it's like the whole time, other than, 6 months after... 6 months of Antonio Conte in his first season. And it does feel like, if you remember the season before Pochettino came, when Tim Sherwood was in charge as an interim manager, we kept getting battered by Chelsea, getting battered by people. And they were, bring him back. Why not? SJ says, let's be honest here. We all knew we would lose. They're just so good this season. Seems they can do the treble. Do you know what? I don't think they're so good, but we made them look better than they are. Nobody else, they can't score a goal from open play against anyone else, and they scored 4 against us. I just think, honestly, when you go to these big grounds or you play against these teams, you can't just, you can't, as the biggest rivals, just be like, yeah, you have all the ball and we'll just do nothing. Because it carries on, it calls the atmosphere of the crowd on. It keeps them behind them. And Thomas Frank consistently does it, home or away. Mizamil on TikTok, stop trying to co-host. No. Ladyweb says, of course Eze was going to score. Yeah, exactly. Of course Eze was going to score. Wolf Mauler says, what most humiliating scenario possible? Yeah, I spoke about it before. I was like, Spurs are the king of finding ways to get memed. So, of course, you let the player who chose Arsenal over you score a hat-trick. What should be doing, what other clubs will be doing in games like this, is absolutely reducing the player who chose your biggest rivals over you, like taking him out, bullying him. But Spurs don't do that. Spurs don't bully players. Spurs just fall over, play into the opposition's team's hands. Spurs are shite. We're so bad. Andrew says, I knew that failing to pull the trigger on Eze earlier would come back to bite us. Yeah, or just offering £10 million over the release clause. And at least then, if he still chooses Arsenal, they have to pay £10 million more. But no. That was Daniel Levy. He had to do it his own way. Blah, 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 blah. Sirloin Steak says, no excuses. 4-1 against Arsenal is reason alone to be sacked immediately. Well, I'll be honest with you. I think if it had been worse, if it had been 5 or 6, if it had been 6, then yeah. But Die, thank you for your comment. Says Champions of Europe 6 months ago. Now we're just an embarrassment. Eze completely tucked Frank up. If I'm a Spurs player, I'm straight on the blower to my agent. I'm getting out of this shit show. Yeah, I don't think it'll be that easy for them to get out, but I know exactly what you're saying. Plush Teddy says, lucky I don't live in a country where there are English fans. I couldn't stand school tomorrow. Well, I live in London, and let me trust you, Arsenal fans are everywhere at the moment. They've all come out of the woodwork. Listen, this is a problem. Arsenal are going to win the league. Arsenal have allowed their manager, Arteta, to build over 6 years, spend nearly £1.5 billion, and now they have 2 great players for every position. They've got the depth, they've got the talent, and they're going to win the league. It's a nightmare. Prima Italia says, Barnaby, you've been critical of Arsenal's style of play, but Tottenham was worse. Arsenal are light years ahead. Yeah, I mean, I've been critical of Arsenal and Tottenham's style of play, but I've been saying for a long time, I think Arsenal are going to win the league. I mean, you know, what do you want me to say? They only scored 4 goals from open play against Spurs. It's only Tottenham who've allowed them to do that, because Tottenham have just like collapsed like a deck of cards whenever anything gets difficult for them. Absolute bunch of pussies. Horrible. TJ says, honestly, we've got to sack him for this. Zinc World says, back the Poch comment. We'll take him back any day. Yeah. We could do worse than getting Poch back. That's the same. Minthura says, Frank thinks Tottenham is the same as Blandford. And PSG says, if you go down, you have to go down fighting. This is shocking. Yeah, absolutely appalling. Lee Baker UK says, embarrassing. Hope is not a strategy. Yeah, there was no strategy. I mean, the strategy, yeah, I guess what you're saying is kind of true. The strategy was like, oh, hope Arsenal don't score. I don't know. It's difficult. I mean, we get battered there whatever way we do it. Ange got his pants pulled down every time he went to the Emirates. It was only Pochettino when he built that great side where we could actually go there and get results. The win in the League Cup and the draw in the league when we went 2-0 up, and then they got it back. Sirius says, lol, what do we expect? Arsenal entered the match with a projected win probability of 70%. Well, to be honest, mate, yes, you're right, but I expected us to not get done 4-1. I mean, other than when we beat them 5-1 in a League Cup semi-final, that's the worst result in a North London derby, I think, certainly in my lifetime of supporting Spurs I can think of. I don't know, Spurs, let me know if there's a worse one, but I don't know. That's worse. Sleeper says, do you do Spurs jokes in your stand-up routine? No. I wouldn't alienate an audience like that. Stephen says it was a training game. Yep, I think that's first. That's fair enough. Lady Webb says, are you Londoners going to work from home tomorrow? Very good. TJ says, does Frank know what a North London derby means? Yeah, I mean, he said it. I saw him interviewed before the game. He said, you know, I really feel how important it is. Spurs down in 9th now, by the way. Man United have a chance to knock us down to 10th with their game tomorrow night against Everton. And we have Fulham at home next week. Romero will be suspended from the Fulham game at home after picking up his 5th booking. Spurs could easily be like quite a way down the bottom half by this time next week. We came 17th last year. Shocking. Absolutely shocking. SJ says we had the best away record till today. Yeah, but, you know, as TJ said, does he know what a North London derby means? You can't put in performances like that. Simon says the manager is not the issue. You said it already. As a knew it, we signed Muani instead. Well, no, Eza chose to go to Arsenal. We signed Eza on the last day. We signed Muani on the last day. Linton, it's true. It says it was men against boys out there. We were totally dominated. That's true. But I will say this. There was a period in that second half, just before Richarlison scored, where actually we had some control of the ball in midfield. And then what happened was Richarlison scored, and in my opinion, Frank basically bottled taking Richarlison off, who had been abject. Richarlison had been absolutely abject all game. He scored that 1 goal, so he bottled bringing him off. He took off Odegaard and Bentancur. So we lose Bentancur in midfield, and we've just been having control of midfield. And we all know that the only kind of green shoots of excitement that we've seen with Spurs in the last month or so has been that link-up play between Udogie, Simons, Odegaard and Muani on the left. But he took off Odegaard and he took off Bentancur to keep Richarlison on. And I promise you, from those 2 subs, we didn't have a kick in that game after that. He took off any control that we had. We didn't have a kick. And I called it at the time. I said, well, we're going to lose control of the game here. And that's exactly what happened. Teo says, for goodness sake, I'm sick of all these complaints. What do you guys expect? Look at the quality of players on both sides. It took Arteta ages to get here. We do not have the team and players. Wake up. Okay, Teo, I hear what you're saying, mate. But how come, answer me this, do you think Tottenham have a worse squad than Sunderland? And Sunderland didn't roll over and die against Arsenal. In fact, nobody has rolled over and died and let their tummies get tickled by Arsenal all season. Arsenal have just been winning by the odd goal here and there from set pieces. But Tottenham roll over on their backs and ask for a tummy scratch. So that's what we're complaining about, mate. We know that they've got better players than them. That they've got better players than us. We know that they've spent £1.5 billion since Arteta's been there. But what we expect is not to get our fucking tummy tickled by them so that we don't have the piss ripped out of us. Is that, you asked, what do you expect? That's what I expect. Matt Richardson says, Frank is far, far too negative. After saying in the pre-match, we always play to win. That was absolutely not playing to win. The setup was to draw at best. Yeah, I think what we've got here is we've gone from Ange Postecoglou. It's like the sublime to the ridiculous. We've got Ange Postecoglou on one end of the scale. Oh, look, mate, this is what we do. This is why we play. And as a result, opposition scoring the same goal in every single game. Either the cross with no one trying to block the cross to the back post and a goal, or the play through midfield on the counter, no midfield there, and there's a goal. Or the Thomas Frank system, which is so defensive that it calls other teams on, lets them get loads of possession, lets them believe in themselves, and eventually they just score a goal. And it's gone from the sublime to the ridiculous. And Spurs got today absolutely what they deserved. They set up, as Matt says in the comments, far too negatively, and it allowed the Arsenal fans throughout that game. Do you think any Arsenal fan ever thought Tottenham were going to cause them any danger? No. We only scored that goal because it was from the halfway line. Deary me. Prima Italia says Arsenal sat back against Spurs twice at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium for the past 2 seasons. What's your point? Even if that's the case, mate, they did it way better than we did because they win. And Johnny Giles says 17th might be a result this season. Lady Webb says we were toothless. That is an understatement. Nick says, did he bring on Johnson to save the game? I don't know why I brought on Johnson at the end. I don't know really what happened. Dara says the fact it was only 4-1 was an understatement. Yeah, I think what you mean by that is, we were lucky to get away with 4-1, which is absolutely true. Kubernetes says even Ange wasn't that clueless. Well, Spurs fans, tell me in the comments, where are you at now? Would you rather Ange be in charge now? Would you rather Ange have stayed than what Thomas Frank is serving up? As some people have rightly said, we were, before this game, we did have the best record away from home, but that has now been blown out of the water. We lost 3 goals on our decent goal difference there, which is why we're down in 9th place, and probably after tomorrow night it'll be 10th. Stephen Pye says, awful performance. Good job. Big up. Cut out towards the end again. I was thinking you'd given up on the match. That was probably, sorry, apologies for that. It was probably while I was setting up the YouTube stream. So that was probably us, probably my fault. SJ says, Vicario saved us from embarrassment. Yeah, that's true. Vicario made some important saves. Linton, hi Linton, says, today we saw the difference between real money and penny pinching. Well, that's true. And that's another thing that's worth talking about. Until Tottenham get their fucking heads out of the sand and realise that if you want to genuinely improve your team, you've got to spend £100 million like Declan Rice cost, or be clever with your purchases by buying from by having good scouts out in Spain like they did with Zubamendi and Marino. Until Tottenham realise that and spend proper money on proper players, we're going to continue to be absolutely shy. But also, I'll just say Thomas Frank made some bizarre decisions today. Once again, just talking about taking off Bentancur and Odegaard at that point. I thought it was mental. Martin says, could have been more competitive, but this Arsenal squad is very strong and will not drop many points. Let's just get the players back fit and go again. Long season left and it doesn't end today. I appreciate you trying to get some positivity there. I guess that's true. Like, would we have done better with Dominic Solanke up front? Yes, because at least he can hold the fucking ball up, whereas Richarlison it just bounces off him all day. Absolutely appalling. Do we miss Kulusevski? Yes, another player who can hold the ball up. Kudus looked out of it, but he didn't get the ball much. I don't know. PSG says the best form of defense is attack. Frank doesn't seem to realize this. Can't allow the opposition to have that ball all the time. I agree with that. Too darn soulful. Says the Spurs players need to get out of this shit show because they are shit. Terrible show today. Melton says very weak. Boys like Siemens, Odegaard, etc. What do you expect? I thought Siemens actually looked all right when he came on. At least he tried to get on the ball. I think Odegaard would have, he was starting to get into the game just before he took him off, which was stupid to take him off, like I said earlier, because it was when the players were on the pitch who he has good chemistry with. Di says, sign a League One manager, become a League One team. Simon Wood says, still think Frank is some kind of tactical genius. If you want to clip up any time I've said Thomas Frank is a tactical genius, feel free to send it to me, because I don't think I've ever said that, really. Andrew says, how much is the fee to recall Vuskovic? I don't think that'll help at the moment. Kamingo says, Frank got it wrong, but too many injuries. Players aren't talented enough. Well, Arsenal have got a lot of injuries as well. So, you know, I don't think we can call that. A lot of our injuries were back on the bench tonight. Bronco says, is Frank even trying to win? And James Thuas says, missing out on Eza really bit us on the arse. Yeah, but I've said it a number of times this afternoon. Tottenham, pretty much the biggest club, certainly in the Premier League, maybe in world football, for finding a way to like get yourselves memed. You know, that's true. You know, what's the best way to get memed in a game like this? Yeah, let Eza score a hat-trick against you. Ridiculous. The Spurs Express says Bentancur caught out on all 3 goals, but I'm sure will continue to be the first name on the team sheet in the weeks to come. I'm not sure. Let's see what other people are saying on Twitter. Oh, dear. Yes. Lee Wilmot. Right. So I mentioned this as well. When we were 3-1 down, we had a throw-in 15 yards in the Arsenal half, and we're trailing 3-1, obviously, and no Spurs player wanted the ball. So we go back, lose the ball in midfield, and they score another one. And Lee Wilmot said, mentioned this when watching it. Hadn't quite realised how soon the 4th goal came after it. Look at the amount of space in the middle of the pitch from the throw-in to. No one wanted to show for the ball there. Again, I'm going to say it again. Like we did when Nuno was our manager, we go to the Emirates and play without a midfield. What are they doing it? Like, what are they doing? It doesn't make any sense. In games like this, you've got to try and control the midfield. Anyway. Oh, dear. That's a weird one from Harvey Troy. Hamish says, I'm sick to shit of Richarlison. Every time I see him starting, my heart drops. He's absolutely useless. He's not a number 9, Hamish. I'm going to say it again. He's not a number 9. He needs to stop playing him as a number 9. He's a left-sided forward. He went on to say, can't see why Frank favours him over Telemuani. So much worse, but watching him today was sad. Brian says, you get what you pay for. We're lacking quality up front. That's an understatement. Doro says, of course, it was Eza with the hat-trick. Primer, again, thank you for your comments, mate. Says, it's exactly the same strategy that Spurs used against Man City. Arsenal are just much better. We had chances on the break against Man City. That's how we scored 2 goals. I don't know. I don't think we played 3 at the back against City. I could be wrong, though. Let me know. I will say, even though it doesn't make a difference, the second goal should have been offside. It really should. But anyway, whatever. Nick in Hong Kong says, roll on January, spend. Gary says, this performance was embarrassing, pathetic, clueless, spineless. That's right. I agree. Macarelli says, the 2-5 was worse. Was that the one? Did we go 2-0 up in that game when Adebayor got himself sent off? Maybe we did. Is that worse? I don't know. Maybe it was. Di says, I wonder if Frank will say this was a good performance. Good question. ABW says, Danso and Odeberg got to be sold. I'm not sure about that, to be honest. And Simon Wood says, Frank has only ever been a mid-table merchant. No surprise to me, Spurs are and will stay mid-table. And PSG says, I thought Frank was a clever manager. Now I don't think so. This was inept. Yeah. John Salvage agrees with me. He says, in a word, embarrassing, just embarrassing. This is beyond a joke. And SJ says, next is PSG. We're doomed. Yeah, exactly. Richard Joseph says, anybody still believing in Frank is delusional. Cut your losses now. Eye test tells you we're not making progress. 0 style of play. Yeah, but I'll keep it on screen, actually. But who do we go for instead? That's the thing. I don't see anyone. Let me know. If you do want Thomas Frank to go, right? Who would we get instead? And presumably at this point, it would be an interim manager job again, wouldn't it? And that hasn't worked. It never works, interim manager jobs. It just doesn't. Man United have done it so many seasons recently. We did it with Sherwood. We did it with David Pleat so many times. It doesn't really work. So I just don't know, you know. I don't know. Doris says, tactics didn't work, not even close. Vidsumi says, in the first half, second half before the substitution, we looked like we could rival them in midfield. Frank took off 2 of our players that actually started to play well and kept on Richarlison, who wasn't. Exactly. That's exactly what I said. That's exactly what I said. RJ says, hashtag Frank out. Tommy says, hey, Barnaby. Again, Frank's starting lineup and formation was ridiculous. Come on, you Spurs. Yeah. I did wonder, like, just playing 2 in central midfield, I was like, just going to get dominated. And that's what happened. Anytime Spurs had the ball in central midfield for the entire game, apart from maybe the 10 minutes in the second half before he made those substitutions, Arsenal were just all over us. And that's why I keep talking about that game when Nuno was in charge. It was exactly the same in central midfield. Really bad. Linton says, Frank never learned from the Sunderland game where they took the game to Arsenal, where they took the game. We went into the game defensively. Yeah, agreed. ABW says, what does Bentancur do? I know some people are having a go at Bentancur. I'm not sure it's all his fault, but let's see what happens. Serious FX says, I mean, let's be practical. Manager needs several windows to get the players he wants. Fair enough. But I think it's going to, I don't know. He's got to find the right way of not going into these games so defensively. He really does. He really does. Doris says Xavi was genuinely decent coming on. Yeah, I thought he was okay. And PSG, like, telling it as it is. Fortune favours the brave, not a bunch of pussies. I agree with that, to be honest. Plush Teddy says, I'm happy that we're down in the league. Make it easier to sack him. Injuries, by the way, no excuses. Also, not that we don't have the players. We at least need to try. Lots of people asking what does Bentancur do in midfield. I really don't think it's his fault today, but I could be wrong. Simon says, if we acted like a proper club and showed us the ambition he would have signed, we delayed it. They signed him in 48 hours. Yeah. Steven says, playing Paulinho over Xavi in the start lost our momentum. And Andrew Cook says, absolute lol at the tummy tickle comments. Well, it's true, isn't it? We just lay down and die for them today. Rubai says, we're now going against PSG. I just hope it won't be that embarrassing against PSG. Yeah, it will. It will be. Can you imagine PSG watching this today? Or maybe tomorrow, like before the game? This week, just being like, and this is the lot you're going to have to play. Good luck. By which it'll mean, like, just enjoy. Just enjoy. Okay, one bit of pro Thomas Frank stuff. Harry D says, oh my God, leave Frank alone. For me, no judgment till February or the end of the season. Yeah, maybe. Sukatai says, wrong lineup, wrong system, maybe the wrong manager if he doesn't learn. What team would have Poch have picked from the same squad? A damn sight more attacking 4-2-3-1, we would be better too. John says, men versus boys, and why are we playing so defensive against Arsenal, the best team in the league? We should be playing to win, not playing not to lose. Yeah, I think kind of everyone feels the same way about that. Vidsumi says, we are passing back, and then the odd sideways pass and then backwards again. Yeah, that, I'm afraid, for any of you kind of saying, you know, keep Thomas Frank, that is what has been happening all season. That is what has been happening all season. David says, Spurs seemed absolutely terrified of Arsenal from the first minute to the last. Yep, that's an understatement. And Simon says, PSG will not be in relaxed pre-season mode. Spurs will get spanked by them, and Fulham without Romero may not be an easy win. It should be. No, well, of course it won't be an easy win. We've got the worst record at home in the Premier League. So it definitely won't be. I'm just turning up the volume here to see if what Carragher's saying. Oh, he's talking about Arsenal still. We might get away with it if he just talks about Arsenal the whole time. ABW says Ange in. Shauno says would have preferred to keep Ange. Serious FX says, funny you blame Rishi again, lol. Was it his fault we conceded 2 goals in the first half? Midfield couldn't make 2 forward passes, but you blame Rishi. I'm not blaming him for us losing. Did you hear me say that? No, I blame him for being not able to hold the ball up, mate. That's what I'm blaming him for. Evan Wells asked, where do we go from here? Well, in answer to that, I think we go into a game away at PSG in the week. And Thomas Frank, he's in an interesting position, isn't he? Because if he goes for the 3 at the back again, they'll just move us all around and dominate us. So it's all going to be very, very difficult yet again. Richard Joseph says, can't show my face at work. We'll have to call in sick. Ryan Ellis says, you can see from the lineup we'd struggle the minute we concede. Agreed. Why change the system / starting lineup in the biggest game of the season so far? Baffling. Because as somebody said earlier, and it's true, Thomas Frank plays scared of the opposition. And yeah, that's the way it is. Anyway, guys, look, I can't handle it anymore, basically. But thanks so much for watching with me. And, you know, I'll do kind of a more considered version of my kind of post-match probably tomorrow. We'll try and talk about it. Vicario's come out to face the press. Anyway,
try and enjoy your Sundays. I bet you won't.
Get yourself to okjersey.com where you can buy the best football shirts around, including this one I'm wearing now, and of course, the absolutely magnificent black Spurs away shirt. And as if that wasn't enough, if you go onto their website and like the look of one of the shirts there, choose your size, pick the Champions League badge for the sleeve as well if you're that way inclined, then go to checkout and type the code BARN into the coupon section. That's BARN as in short for Barnaby. And when you do, you'll get a whopping 8% off your purchase. Now, I'm no mathematician, but 8% means if you've spent, say, and let's face it, I'm being optimistic here, 100 quid, then you get £8 off, not to be sniffed at. Get yourself to okjersey.com to pick one up, or if you're too lazy to type in the website, just scan the QR code that's on the left of me throughout this video. Enjoy.